Big shout out to today's video sponsor, Linsoul. Check out their fantastic deals in the links in the video description. I really enjoy Kiwi Ears products. They make some of my favourite IEMs out there. I first started with the $35 cadenza, which I much enjoyed, but found it to be incredibly laid back and warm, with a very smooth sound profile and decent level of immersive imaging. The Kiwi Ears Dolce is not here to replace the cadenza at just $25, but impresses in many areas for the money. Let me tell you more about why I think it's so good in my review of the Kiwi Ears Dolce. Hey guys, I'm Ryan Thomas and big thanks to Linsoul for sending out today's subject matter. If you'd like to find out more about their great deals, check out the links in the video description. The Dolce is a single dynamic IEM, which is very simple in its presentation and just in its technical abilities. It is out there to compete with the likes of the 7Hz Solnote Zero as one of your first IEMs or an entry into the audiophile space. It comes with a very basic cable and some very basic tips. It doesn't come with a case, which is to be expected at this price point, and overall is at a very basic setup. Now, there's nothing wrong with the ear tips. The cable is as cheap as you basically can get. It isn't really as nice as something like the cadenza's cable. And the focus is on audio quality for the money, in which I think this thing does pretty well. Let's talk about the shells. They're a clear plastic with a very cheap feeling faceplate. They look alright for the money, but only come in one colour. You can see the driver really clearly, and it's quite interesting to see just how basic these things are to be set up. The shell is light and I found them to be relatively comfortable as well. The nozzle length is about average, so these should fit in most people's ears, and I didn't really feel any discomfort when using these for 45 hours at a time. The sound profile is very V-shaped. It is very, basic, as I wanted to say, but couldn't find another word for it. It's very standard in the way it's presented. It's going to appeal to the masses. It's not a particularly special kind of tuning. V-shape meaning that there's emphasis on bass, there's emphasis on treble, but the mid-range is kind of recessed and brought down, and this is a very popular way of tuning mainstream earbuds. The cadenza is a warmer, a silkier sort of sound with less emphasis and less detail in the treble. This is kind of the opposite of that, so there is quite a lot of bass, but there's also more harshness, I would say. It's not harsh, but there's more harshness to the upper mids and the treble compared to the cadenza, which is way more laid back. This gives you the advantage of them being very immersive to play games with, because the deep rumbles of, say, a grenade or an explosion are more there. In terms of CSGO and sort of FPS gaming, I found that these were far more immersive but less accurate because they are a wider profile with more dynamic range. The 7Hz Zeros, which I would call one of the best cheap gaming IEMs you can get, is flatter. So gunshots sound closer to the volume level of footsteps, but that means that you can hear them better and you're not going to get deafened when you turn up the audio. With these, it's wider, so there is a bigger disparity. So for really critical listening and trying to find details, these are going to be harder. But when playing FPS games, I found that my gaming didn't get any worse because I was using these. It's just they weren't as tailored to an esports kind of setup compared to the 7Hz Zero. But when playing games like Battlefield or Call of Duty, where you kind of want to feel like you're playing for fun, you're more immersed, these are better. Music is also more enjoyable with these than something like the 7Hz Zero, just because they're tuned to be more fun. There's not necessarily any kind of differences in resolution, it's just the way that they're tuned. And compared to the cadenza, these will give you more sibilance, so if you're sensitive to that, maybe try and go with the cadenza instead. But I feel for most people, these are going to sound the more engaging. There's a fair amount of imaging and immersion, hearing where footsteps are coming from, where gunshots are coming from. Pretty good with the Dolce actually, and the same for like live music, hearing where instruments are, pretty decent. Not the best I've ever heard, but for $25, I'd say better than I was expecting, and I would say probably better than the cadenza. So yeah, overall, the Kiwi Ears Dolce, a fantastic entry point, potentially your first IEM, better than some of the cheaper KZ offerings that I've heard, and a good complement to the cadenza. And that's my review for the Kiwi Ears Dolce. They are a good entry point into IEMs. they sound good. You know, they're not built very well, their cable's pretty cheap, but it's $25. I mean, come on. There are shops out there selling you a bacon sandwich and a coffee for near enough $25. So yeah, links to Linsoul will be in the video description. Big thanks to them for sponsoring today's video. Thank you all so much for watching, and a big thanks to my patrons as well for being continually supportive. I'm Ryan Thomas. Like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and I'll catch you later. Cheers.